So I'm going back to the moment, right, where you've been focusing on certain priorities, and then first month of COVID, 2 to 3x scaling in a month, and then having to totally change priorities to then deal with that next phase of scaling. And so now it's been about a year, and so I think what I'm curious about is this concept and this idea of at what point do you revisit your assumptions or your priorities and identify what's the next level you need to get to in terms of scalability. Like, can you share a little bit about like what was the paradigm early on pre-COVID for like building for scalability, and then now that you've built all these internal toolings, when do you revisit that thought process and then create like a new set of assumptions?
Yeah, that's a tough one. So, I think that naturally it somewhat happens on a quarterly basis. We're also somewhat of a seasonal business because we work with kids who are on an academic calendar. And so there are some natural breakpoints where, like going into the fall or going into um, the spring or the summer, like those are points where it's always been a good time for us to kind of reset. I think that it's important on a quarterly basis to do your metrics over again, but your roadmap is kind of, uh, I view the roadmap as a little more fluid, and so that's why we've kind of been moving to the more 2 cycles out planning process instead. But on the metrics front, I think you're always looking for leading metrics to indicate if the lagging priorities are happening or not. In startups, frankly, growth is the number one. And so basically, once you kind of see that the operations metrics have stabilized a little bit, it's probably always behooves you to move people back to growth. Because to a certain extent, if you have growth, you can solve for the scaling problems by hiring a lot more people, raising more money to hire more people, like that kind of thing. If you have growth, but if you don't have growth, then that's a very different conversation. And so, with a startup, I would say like you're constantly thinking about when am I going back to focus on growth. For us specifically, our retention is very strong, and so I would also keep an eye on retention on a, at least biweekly basis, because retention is a little bit of a lagging metric. So you might not see early indications of it changing as much. But that's the other one, like you can't leak people that you're acquiring. And that's been less of a focus for us because it's naturally been a lot better of a number for us. And so I would say like those two, even when we're focused on something else, like every week I look at those numbers, and if we see trends in those that are not good, then we put more resources behind them, because those are very, early signs for things like that are definitely ones that, that you want to focus on.